this is really a forum that's trying to be extremely pragmatic and practical in providing solution to the SMEs across the continent. If you look at the way the forum has been sort of divided in terms of just telling a story, yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about growth strategy. What do you need to do to actually expand your business? And we had a lot of commitment from government in providing a business environment that's conducive to actually growing an SME. Today, we spent a lot of time talking about actually finance strategy. And this is really important, as you may know very well. Many SMEs face access to finance as they grow. So hopefully, they've looked at the different options and different financing options, whereby as they grow their company, they can sort of rely on those options and getting the funding that they need. And then tomorrow, we're going to be talking about innovation. You know, let's face it, we live in a world where innovation will take it to the next level in terms of technology and so on. So hopefully, SMEs will walk away, get a better strategy, get access to finance, and get sort of tools for innovation going forward.
Right. Earlier this year, the IMF did release a very interesting, the regional economic outlook for sub-Saharan Africa, and it did hint on a few points. One of them was the informal sector. Now, there's a debate. On one end, should we include the informal sector very rashly and hastily into the tax bracket? And on the other hand, if we do include the informal sector, which is close to 80% of sub-Saharan Africa, it might actually dwindle the little growth that they've been realizing. Now, SMEs here, many of them do have an informal background. Where do you draw the line? Where do you come in, Ibrahima? What is your take on this particular one? Should the informal sector be taxed and included onto the tax bracket to go above that 20% tax to GDP ratio?
Well, look, the short answer is they should be included, obviously, because all the players of the economy should be involved in the way we actually grow our economies across the continent.
Shouldn't it be gradual, whereby it's
exactly,
like a
that's where I was getting at. Yeah. Obviously, there's a process that has to be in place. And the first step, in my view, if you're an informal company, they need to help you to actually formalize yourself so that anybody could be actually putting money into your company and eventually help you to grow. And there's so many informal folks across the continent get great talents and great entrepreneurship spirit. And I think we need to help them, first of all, in formalizing themselves, getting better organized, and eventually we're able to actually access capital from around the world. Now, I understand that some of them don't want to be formalized. They want to stay informal because that's the way they enjoy it. Exactly, they're not paying taxes. But I think eventually for them to be real players and contributors to our economies, they have to formalize themselves, create jobs, modernize themselves, and be able to obviously pay taxes. Because with the taxes, that's the way we're able to build, the school and the hospitals and so on. So it's really important, and I think they understand what is their vision, what's their ambition, and eventually, if they decide they want to formalize themselves, I'm assuming that most of our African governments have systems in place whereby you can help them to get themselves established, get themselves better organized, so they can actually contribute to the economy.
Right. Are we seeing a sort of a trade-off here? On one end, you do include them, and ultimately your tax to GDP ratio does go up. And on the other end, maybe you do not include them; they thrive. And on the third-pronged approach is maybe equity. Now, having more of our capital markets grow. Now, these are three options that governments and policymakers might be actually stuck pondering day in, day out, or even nights in.
Well, look, I don't think they have to be stuck, because the reality is I will go for the option that's actually include them, but help them basically to move from the informal sector to actually formalize themselves. And that way, eventually, when you have gone through the transformation process and they need capital from the capital market, from other sources, you can help them go raise the money. And that's the view that I believe in, because there's so many companies or so many entrepreneurs, and formal, all over Africa, whereby a bit of a helping hand, either from the government or from other advisors, they manage to actually go through the process, and eventually they will have to get themselves organized. We live in a very competitive world, whereby if you keep actually staying in the informal sector, the size of the market is very small. It's very easy for the competitors to come and take away some of your market share. Yeah. So I think it's in their best interest to really look at this and say, look, maybe with a better organization, a better transformation, they can actually take it to the next level. But they have to be able to want to do that. Yeah. And that's why one has to take their time and get to know them, get to understand their history and why they get into business. And if you build a trusting relationship, hopefully you'll be able to actually help them to go through the process of becoming better entrepreneurs, as opposed to remaining in an informal sector like you see in many countries.